What if I told you that one of America's most infamous automotive failures is now worth more than the luxury cars that destroyed it? The 1958 Edsel Citation was supposed to be Ford's masterpiece, a chrome-plated monument to American ambition. Instead, it became a punchline so brutal that comedians are still telling the jokes 70 years later. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. The car they laughed off showroom floors has transformed into one of the most fascinating survivors of Detroit's golden age. This is the story of how spectacular failure can become legendary success. Picture this: late 1950s America, riding the post-war wave of prosperity like a V8 powered rocket ship. New suburbs sprawling across farmland. Chrome gleaming on every street corner. Detroit churning out dreams wrapped in sheet metal and ambition. Ford Motor Company stood at the peak of its power, but the executives saw something that kept them up at night. Between their bread-and-butter Ford brand and the upscale Mercury, there was a gap, a profitable gap, where Buick and Oldsmobile were stealing customers and cash by the truckload. So Ford made a billion-dollar bet. They'd create an entirely new division from scratch, something bold enough to shake up the entire industry. They named it after Edsel Ford, Henry's son, a man remembered for elegance and vision. The name carried weight, history, promise. Inside Ford's Dearborn headquarters, designers burned midnight oil sketching fever dreams of automotive greatness. Engineers calculated, recalculated, pushed boundaries. This wasn't just another model year refresh. This was Ford swinging for the fences, betting the company could create magic on demand. Everything built toward E-Day, September 4th, 1957. Ford orchestrated a nationwide reveal that felt more like a Hollywood premiere than a car launch. The advertising blitz called it the car of the future, and when those showroom curtains finally pulled back, there it stood. The 1958 Edsel Citation, gleaming under spotlights like a silver monument to American confidence. That vertical grille hit you first. Tall, narrow, chromed to perfection, splitting the front end like nothing else on American roads. People either loved it instantly or hated it on sight, no middle ground. Even today, if you've ever stopped mid-step to stare at that face, trying to decide how you feel about it, you're experiencing exactly what confused buyers felt in 1957. Detroit had never built anything quite like it. Chrome spears ran the length of the body, catching light like drawn swords. The tail fins rose with just enough swagger to acknowledge the fin wars raging across late 50s highways without tipping into absurdity. Long low, unmistakably American. You could spot a Citation 3 blocks away, and that was exactly Ford's intention. No blending into traffic for this machine. Step inside, and the ambition became even clearer. Two-tone leather that felt expensive under your hands. Deep carpets your shoes sank into. Metallic threaded fabrics that shimmered under the dome lights like something from a luxury yacht. The dashboard wore its complexity like a badge of honor. Theatrical, almost proud of itself. And there, mounted right in the center of the steering wheel, sat the Teletouch transmission pad. Little push buttons promising to make gear changes as simple as pressing an elevator button. If you've ever wondered what it felt like to shift with just your thumb while the future watched, the Citation offered that exact experience. Under that massive hood lived the E410, a 410 cubic inch V8 breathing out a factory-rated 345 horsepower. The numbers came straight from Ford's engineering sheets and period brochures. This wasn't a muscle car in the traditional sense, but it moved the Citation's roughly 4,500 pounds with a quiet, relentless confidence that made highway passing feel effortless. Ford engineered it to stand toe-to-toe with the Buick Roadmaster and Chrysler New Yorker. On paper, the specs put it right in the fight. But even as the marketing machine roared to life with radio spots, magazine spreads, and showroom banners stretching across mainstream America, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Ford's executives, blinded by their own optimism, didn't see them yet. But they were there, waiting. A cooling economy, a skeptical market, a design too bold for its own good. Sometimes the very features meant to make a car special become the anchors that drag it down. The Citation carried plenty of both. The cracks appeared before most Americans ever touched a Citation's door handle. By late 1957, the U.S. economy was sliding into recession, and families who planned to trade up to bigger, flashier V8 sedans suddenly clutched their wallets tighter. Dealerships nationwide felt the chill. Showroom traffic slowed to a trickle. Financing became harder to secure. And right into that economic headwind, Ford launched one of the most expensive mid-tier automobiles Detroit had ever attempted to sell. The Citation, positioned as Edsel's flagship, now wore a price tag that made buyers wince. It landed in automotive no man's land, too expensive for budget-conscious Ford shoppers, not prestigious enough for Mercury or Buick loyalists to switch brands. If you've ever watched someone stare at something they desperately want but can't quite justify buying, you can imagine the tension hanging in Edsel showrooms that fall. Then the quality problems started surfacing, the kind no advertising budget could paper over. Edsels were assembled in multiple factories, some dedicated, some shared with other Ford products, and quality control became a nightmare. One Citation might roll off the line perfectly aligned, doors closing with that satisfying solid thunk, while the next arrived with misaligned trim, leaking gaskets, or electrical gremlins that left mechanics scratching their heads. Production teams had been rushed to meet impossible deadlines. Engineering specifications sometimes arrived incomplete or contradictory. Prototype components accidentally made it into customer vehicles. And the Teletouch transmission, Edsel's showcase innovation, became its most visible problem. Mounted in the steering wheel hub, where it looked futuristic and felt convenient, the system lived dangerously close to engine heat. Contacts warped under temperature stress. Moisture infiltrated the electronics. Wiring shifted out of alignment. Drivers would reach for the horn and accidentally slip into neutral or find the buttons completely unresponsive on humid mornings. If you've ever wondered how one engineering decision can haunt an entire brand, Teletouch stands as the perfect cautionary tale. But mechanical troubles were only half the disaster. The other half came from America's brutal sense of humor. Newspapers and magazines savaged that vertical grille with relentless mockery. Cartoonists made it a national sport. Industry rivals whispered that Ford had built a car with a face only an accountant could love. Once that narrative took hold, it became impossible to shake. The Edsel name, barely months old, became synonymous with failure almost overnight. Desperate dealers slashed prices, discounting Citations so heavily that the flagship model sometimes sold for less than mid-range competitors. But even deep discounts couldn't move the metal. Customers weren't just buying a car anymore. They were buying into all the uncertainty and jokes attached to it. One by one, unsold Citations gathered dust on lots from California to Ohio, chrome dulling under indifferent sun. By mid-1958, Ford executives faced the brutal truth. The Edsel project, envisioned as a fourth major division alongside Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln, was collapsing under its own weight. They trimmed the lineup for 1959, softened the controversial styling, simplified the over-engineered features. But the damage ran too deep. The brand's reputation was shattered, replaced by a national narrative that no amount of chrome or horsepower could reverse. The Citation suffered most brutally. As the top-tier model, it carried the highest expectations and therefore absorbed the hardest fall. Orders evaporated. Production numbers plummeted. Within months, the car meant to be Edsel's crown jewel quietly disappeared from brochures and dealer floors. By November 1959, Ford pulled the plug. Factory lines stopped mid-shift. Showroom signs came down. The Edsel division, just 2 years old, nearly $500 million spent, vanished like a fever dream. A ghost story in Detroit's history books. Do you think Ford gave up too soon? Or was the project doomed the moment that vertical grille was approved? Today, the surviving Citations live quieter, more dignified lives. Some hide in family garages beneath heavy covers, like aging movie stars avoiding the paparazzi. Others rest in barns where dust settles gently over chrome that still catches light when the doors swing open. And then there are the restored examples, towering, gleaming reminders of what 1950s American luxury looked like before the world moved on. If you've ever approached one at a car show and felt your pace slow involuntarily, well, you understand that this car still commands a presence that photographs can never quite capture. Behind the wheel, the Citation feels like time travel. The steering carries a weight modern cars abandoned decades ago. The suspension floats over pavement with that trademark 1950s softness, more yacht than sedan. And that big 410 V8 breathes with old-school confidence, each pulse of torque rolling through the cabin like the steady rhythm of something alive and powerful. Drive it long enough, and you realize you're not just piloting a car. You're piloting a frozen moment in American automotive history. The collectors who keep these machines running aren't chasing bragging rights or investment returns. They do it because the Edsel story resonates in ways success stories never quite can. Success is predictable, comfortable, forgettable. But spectacular, ambitious failure leaves questions hanging in the air. It sparks endless debate. It forces people to wonder what might have happened if timing, economy, and engineering had aligned just slightly differently. Maybe that's why the Citation endures among rare classic cars. It's a machine built on audacious ideas, even if those ideas crashed and burned on impact. Look closely at one today, and that vertical grille doesn't feel like a mistake anymore. It feels like a signature, something daring, something that refused to blend into the crowd. The very feature critics mocked is now exactly what draws crowds at shows and cruise-ins. It's the kind of detail only a company chasing the future would gamble everything on. Love it or hate it, the world is more interesting because cars like the Edsel existed. Search for 1950s American luxury, Edsel collectors, or vintage V8 cruisers, and you'll discover how this car's reputation has transformed over the decades. What once symbolized corporate miscalculation now represents courage, the kind Detroit rarely shows anymore. The Citation is more than chrome and steel. It's a reminder of an era when automakers weren't afraid to swing for the fences, even if they struck out hard enough to rattle the entire industry. It's proof that sometimes the biggest failures become the most memorable successes, just on a different timeline than anyone expected. So as the dust settles and the garage door closes, I think the Edsel Citation leaves us with something more valuable than a cautionary tale about market research and focus groups. It reminds us that America's automotive golden age was built by people willing to take wild, imperfect, wonderful risks. And every time one of these survivors rumbles to life, it keeps a small piece of that fearless spirit alive. If this story triggered a memory, maybe a car your father drove, a dream you chased, or a classic you let slip away, share below. I'd love to hear the stories that shaped your journey. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten Detroit history, go ahead and like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more tales from America's chrome-covered past. See you next time.